So we have a running competition between Studio Room 2, which you are in, and Studio Room 3, which is next door. Which room can be louder? Now you can choose not to participate, because if I were in your seat, I might not love the idea. But if you'll do me a personal favor and at least give a large round of applause for Sandra and Bruno from Fortum today. They are quite excited and caffeinated, ready to talk to you about accountability through outsourced responsibility. And we'll have some Q&A towards the end. With that, please take it away.
Thank you so much. It did pump me up, so many people clapping about accountability, and and thank you for joining, actually. I'll start with that. So hi, my name is Bruno. I'm working at Fortum, responsible for the area of IT operations. So among other things, I'm accountable for things like infrastructure from on-prem to cloud, edge locations, network, service management, cybersecurity, digital end experience, and end-user services. So the foundations of our IT, on how we do IT as Fortum. And I'm here joined by my lovely colleague, Sandra. You want to say hi? And,
I am Sandra, Cloud FinOps lead at Fortum, and my responsibilities are FinOps service at the company. And that goes from getting the data, showing the data, working through processes and charging back. I'm working with procurement, engineers, application teams, and also cloud vendors, which we have several.
Quite a lot.
Yep.
But you might be wondering, because we are in this lovely location, what is Fortum? Because you might not be familiar. So Fortum is the third largest clean energy producer of Europe. We are based in the Nordics. In Finland is we are headquartered, and our presence is mostly, well, within the Nordics, but also within Poland, the UK, and even India. We have some business there. So it's quite a vast amount, and we are looking especially how we are producing energy. So we have multiple sources. Welcome for the ones coming late. I will not flag you. Don't feel embarrassed by it. Joking. We have sources like hydro production, solar production, wind, nuclear, and district heating. So quite a lot of large, vast amount of different sources on how we deliver this reliable clean energy. But one addition to that is that we are also partnering with a lot of companies to drive decarbonization in industries. And actually, that is very close to FinOps, because while most people are looking, I guess a lot of you are looking into how you use cloud in a more sustainable manner and deliver value, in addition to that, we are actually making the cloud more sustainable by partnering with companies like Microsoft or like Amazon, Equinix, and looking at how we build more sustainable data centers that can not just be useful for companies, but also reduce actually our carbon footprint and our decarbonization. Because it's not just about how you use it, it's also how the cloud itself is built. Of course, we have this strong Nordic focus, so we are looking especially on the regions that are in the Northern Europe and Central Europe. But here talking about FinOps, or related to FinOps, and especially on outsourced responsibility. So it's important also to give you some context on how we have been driving that change. So we are a large enterprise, so any large enterprises usually have a number of outsourced vendors and outsourced capabilities. And 5 years ago, we actually had a very scattered amount of vendors. There was a bit ad hoc usage of vendors in different ways, shapes, and form, without really any thought into the big picture. A lot of internal silos. Engagement of our internal people and that mix was low. And there was overall lack of the technology vision as itself. So IT was just something that you will use regardless if it's internal or internal. That started to change. We started to consolidate the ecosystem, especially when it comes to software development. We started to build a software engineering community, a data science community. So it started to be more internally aligned. There was more internal ownership of the things, not just the applications that we were developing, but also any kind of applications that we were from partners that we were using and running in our data centers and in cloud. That also started to drive better engagement from our people, more strong ownership. So there was this micro clusters, depending on domain areas, between internal and externals. And of course, now we started also taking a little bit one notch up, which is not just looking at different domains, but actually reviewing completely how are we delivering IT services to our business. So looking at the whole service delivery model, looking at our operating model, the whole portfolio, and looking at partners to co-develop and co-innovate with us having a strong driver's seat. Because naturally, it all boils down to accountability and responsibility. And in a way, it's a little bit easier to think about responsibilities. You know, responsibilities you can give, you can delegate, you can outsource, but it all boils down on this picture, which is that while you can do all of that, it all boils down to who is accountable. Because when things go wrong, you don't look at your suppliers, you don't even look necessarily at individuals. You are looking at who within the company is actually accountable to provide that, and if something went wrong, why did it went wrong? So even though you might delegate the responsibility to for some areas from some teams, and they might in turn delegate that to suppliers, the whole chain is incredibly important. And what we started to look when we started to think about how we deliver value to the business with IT services, we started to look that we have a huge amount of processes built throughout the past, 10 years, 15 years, that were a little bit like a puzzle or a map that you had to navigate. And the challenge has been that whoever is responsible to provide that service at the time, they are putting themselves in the driver's seat. They are looking at how are we providing this service and how do we coordinate ourselves. And that's a little bit of a backwards thinking, because it never puts who is using the service in the first place. So people often are looking at, think in your companies, in your IT, central IT, and how you are looking, onboarding a user in the company, which is actually an HR process in this particular case. But let's say that you want to provide a new cloud environment for a new team. If you think about all that process that goes around, quite oftentimes is built not for the person who is requesting that, but actually from the team that is providing that service, be it internal or external. So when we started to lose track across the years on the end user and actually what really matters, which is delivering that business value. So when we started to look at our service model, we started with normal IT service management framework. We are not reinventing the wheel, so we look at what are the industry best practices. And we started from the end user in mind, regardless if it's a developer, regardless if it's a service manager, or regardless if it's an end user, someone in accounting that just needs something in IT. We started to look holistically IT as a whole. And navigating through that, we came to the realization that while often we talk about application management, there's also that strong need to think about platform as a whole, regardless if it's developer or core IT business. Because when you start also looking at that, you start making sense of the chaos. And we have a lot of chaos. Just to give you a bit of some numbers, we have roughly 450 plus applications, platforms, services. And here, an application can mean an HR system, or it can mean a mobile application that we are delivering to our customers. So the complexity, even each of these numbers, is a bit different. Across different clouds, with edge locations, with systems that need to run in our power plants, with roughly 40 of those 450 are mission critical to deliver energy to our customers, be it users or be it consumers or companies. We have scattered 200 plus IT vendors that have been now starting to consolidate across in different areas and different SLA types. And that becomes really hard when you want to lead FinOps. And now I'm going to pass the ball to Sandra, because she will tell you the horror story, which was joining Fortum and the complexity around that.
Thank you. So which button is this?
Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Example. system application. One of the most complex applications from the point of how many different internal, external, and in general parties are involved. And probably also the one example underlying this is very many outsourced parties. So this particular application is based on vendor application. So there's product vendor, Fortum's product with value-added customization on top of that. And in the center, there's application service manager, who has the overall responsibility for the whole landscape of technical landscape of application, including forecasting, optimizing costs, and cost management in general. And here you see several bubbles, and these bubbles are contracts probably, they are relationships. Some of those bubbles can contain several outsourced or insourced parties, different, for different tasks within that particular function even. So you have license management is managed by another party. Application management is very interesting. We have 7 types of how we group applications based on complexity and how many different parties in what combinations are managing them. Starting from very simple one where there's engineering team, there's engineer who is creating the workload in cloud, who is managing it and maintaining it, to a very complex one where different parties are doing different activities that impact application. And cost management here is another big thing that service manager is accountable for and responsible for. And there are many automated processes in the FinOps framework maturity. We are walking, we are running sometimes, and sometimes we are also crawling in some cases. We have automated a lot. We have showbacks, we have chargebacks, we have several clouds working together regarding this, and we have automated forecasts. But FinOps adoption challenge number 1 in this picture for us is decision-making and process bottlenecks. And that is starting from delayed actions due to mismatched communications, which is driven by fragmented efforts by multiple cloud vendors, multiple vendors in general, which creates ownership gap in cost management. And there is also expectation that cost optimization is just another service in our service type of model. And that all is fueled with general resistance to change. So here is one big takeaway. To boost efficiency and drive engagement, the change must come from within. That's where real incentive actually lies. We cannot, can I go back?
Yeah.
We do not, we maybe have, but it doesn't make sense to expect externals to do the best of their efforts to work together to improve efficiency of our processes. So we have to drive it. We have been doing FinOps activities, or previously they have been cost management or cost optimization task forces, and different capabilities have been introduced for several years. And now when we are looking back, what are the major show slowers for these actually taking off FinOps practice across this landscape? There were 2 major blocks that we recognized, and that is visibility and data management, and coherence and governance. Visibility and data management, when you have different parties who see only part of the picture, so there are data silos, they have different access. Then we have inconsistent workflows between different vendors. There are different ticketing systems, different ways of communications, and, well, passivity in general. If you're not being active and trying to pull this together, they will not do that for you. So a way of dealing with this now is basically recognizing that us versus them doesn't work. We need to work together. We drive that, but we need to figure out together without pushing. That also is not necessarily working always, or expecting, but building together, opening data visibility where it makes sense, where you recognize risks, of course, but if several parties need to see the data to understand the totality of the task at hand, then maybe give that access. Rethink your rules and the previous perceptions. Plug into existing processes where you can. It's an enterprise that we are working with. There are a lot of processes already in place. There are workflows going. There are different systems already working. Starting a new process takes a while. So if you can plug in into existing process, if there is certain things that existing partner is doing where you can put in FinOps capability, add on to that and communicate it. If not, and we can see it later, we have existing processes that we adapt and create a new process for thinking about those existing processes. And learning together while you do that, learning together how the best to drive this. And coherence and governance comes from misaligned priorities between vendors, internals and externals, ambiguous contracts, power dynamics definitely, depending who is bigger in this partnership, cultural differences also. And we tackle that with defining roles from the FinOps capability or adoption perspective. We define RACI when we think about the process. Okay, which party is now on which part of this responsible, accountable, who should be informed, who should be a consultant. And building joint KPIs. Don't just go with KPIs that someone is proposing because that's the way how they can measure or that's how they apply it to other customers and you're just one of the customers. Or don't go with preconception because previously that is how your management told you how we should measure. So build the KPIs that make sense, prioritizing to what is important to you and what you actually can measure on a regular basis together. This way building a relationship on daily operations and people level, which is most important. And you learn together during this process. So, puzzle. Many puzzle pieces. And you know the challenge that we have is usually getting engineer to take action, right? We were looking at FinOps framework and thinking, where is engineer? Who is engineer in all this big scattered environment? What is engineer even? What virtual persona makes of all these puzzle pieces, depending on what is being done to application, to be called engineer? And we came up with that if you look at specific cases of different applications, which sometimes feels like they are snowflakes, every different application has different combination, we came up that engineer can be different parties. It's another party that is managing officially application on, by the way, 4 different levels of support. So it can be also different partners managing the same application. And there could be another persona, still engineer, who is patching your virtual machines. Could be another short-term contract where the partner is coming in and creating some additional function and leaves. So the personas are changing even though the task at hand is engineering. The same way thinking about workload optimization, we think, okay, if I would be just engineer, just one engineer, nobody else involved, I see cost optimization opportunity, I maybe do it right away, I create a task for tomorrow, I review it, I execute it, I close the task. That would be one person. Now when we take a look at specific application, okay, in this case, it's some maybe FinOps Central persona is creating recommendation request, creating a ticket, someone else is maybe reviewing, then it's being sent to someone else maybe to execute another party to actually do the recommendation, and then another party is reviewing again and closing the ticket. Sounds fun. So this is our blueprint, so to say, process, simplified. This is going through recommendation, one simple recommendation it could be, or several, of cloud cost optimization. So number 1, creating demand ticket per cost code. So it could be application level, several recommendations how you could optimize your environment. That is done by FinOps team. The ticket now is logged to application team, official application management support team. They are reviewing it. Application ticket also is informing application service manager that that thing is happening. Application management team is explaining to service manager what are recommendations. and giving suggestions. Now, application service manager is responsible to approving the ticket or disapproving, rejecting it. Now, if it is a reservation, then it goes to, the ticket is created to central team, and FinOps team is purchasing reservation as commitment. If it's not reservation, then it goes further in the chain. The change ticket is now created to do the change that is approved, and that is done by platform system manager, because that is another ticketing system with our externals. The recommendation is being executed by CloudOps team, and that could be internal, it could be external team who is doing the change, downgrading the disk maybe. And then the closing change ticket done by system manager or platform, and the demand ticket is closed. So it doesn't always have to go from 1 to 7 all the way. In simpler cases, let's say FinOps team comes up with a list of recommendations and logs tickets to different applications. Application team sees recommendation and just does it. And that's it. And informs FinOps central team, we did it, thank you, this was great. So we jump into 7 right away. Or they reject it right away, that's also possible. Or they tell us, please snooze this. We're not gonna do that now, we are in the process, let's catch up in 2 months again. Or it can start with application team and service manager, they do have access to the data. They noticed that there's a recommendation. They create a ticket for the change for CloudOps team to do the change on their application. So other changes that we were doing and rethinking how we work with externals were going from reactions to external inputs to internal driven changes. And that was in 4 major areas: data, people, SLAs, and KPIs. For data, we previously had third-party tool, which was sending out recommendations on monthly basis to application owners. And it was sending not just to application owners, usually it ended up sending also 20 more people from different parties, partners, from different parts of the bubble. And usual communication that happened after that, or action, the biggest action was no action, or I was sometimes seeing reply all, can somebody please take care of this? So we went into giving access to tool to as much as possible. Anybody who can any impact or might be asked, do you know anything about this, should have access to the data right away. Is it third-party tool? Is it the internal Cloud Insights tools, which we have also parallelly having? So that's one. And also externals should have access to internal tools where our internal people are going to be comparing to their data to our internal tools, where it makes sense again, access level. People, not only FinOps SME, not only FinOps lead, and not only service managers need to know what's happening with cloud spend, who is doing recommendations, what the state on our potential of savings maybe, what kind of reservation possibilities are there, and so on. So we are opening also, we have opened FinOps monthly meetings where we invite, we started with 100 plus, I think it's growing. Of course, not everybody is joining. We are recording those sessions because we have very many meetings in enterprise, we love them. So we record the sessions and people can join, and we open this for anybody who is interested. Please just check in, that like you don't have to necessarily be responsible for this particular activity to be invited. SLAs, no having FinOps service SLAs at all before, but then we do have SLAs for the services in the company usually. Previously it was kind of thought that there are just FinOps as a service is just an add-on to other services really. So we started to think, okay, but how will we measure that what we have as an external, for instance, FinOps service, that it's being delivered well? And that's an, in general, interesting topic to think about a bit. So we went for priority, achievable, and focusing on currently what's most important for us when we're introducing this FinOps as a service. And that is inquiry resolution time and trainings. So delivered regular trainings, number of trainings in quarter, And also inquiries, and inquiries can be different. It can be, can you help me to understand what's going on? How long time does it take for the FinOps service to reply and answer and go through them? KPIs, we have had quite a lot of discussions about this, if savings opportunity should be KPI. We do have still KPI as in cost optimization opportunities, but we always have to take it with a grain of salt. 50% maybe is realistic, and then also it depends if we actually get someone to take an action, and that decision will be in application teams. So is that number telling us the best we can at the moment what we want to achieve? Let's focus on things we can control and measure them on a regular basis now. Cloud waste. Cloud waste seems like no-brainer, seems for any engineer, seems like, well, if you have detached volumes, if you have orphan snapshots, just delete them. What are you doing? So these are the things we measure. We can't also do everything centrally for all those cloud waste recognized resources, but that is one we can look at, and that's what we can say, okay, we don't want to go above a certain level, at least. Budget overruns is what will bring actual savings, if you think from financial point of view. So what we are starting to look, and that way we are getting to things right away, is how many and which cost codes or applications are most likely to overrun budget by the end of this year, or already have overrun the amortized part of the budget. And this way we get them to look into data to understand what is driving this, what is different from what they were expecting, and also putting a bit of pressure. And recommendations reviewed percentage, that is what in another hour during the phase of learning and trying to understand how we work together, basically we have this many recommendations, maybe not all we can execute, maybe it's stuck somewhere in that flow and it's not moving further, but we can measure how many of those recommendations we have talked through, how many we have reached out to teams and explained them and got feedback maybe, and we know, okay, this application, they are working on something, they're not going to do, it's a big potential, but it's not going to happen. So it's very good also to both understand the process working together and teaching teams and measure this as basically how much you have covered in the process. We have one KPI that is my wish, and that is to go to measuring, and this is KPI that I would put on external as the FinOps services, that would be the time of feedback for recommendation. And that would kind of make you going into more mature phase. Currently, we have recommendations that are taking very long time. It's stuck in ticketing queues, and who can sell something, and where is it, and follow up. So basically focusing on having the faster, smoothest process on reviewing these recommendations. Challenges ahead, a lot. So I took out several of them. Communication, it always starts with communication, it ends in communication, it's communication. Which channels we use between different parties. Are we using the best now possibilities? How to improve the feedback from internals and externals? We want to hear from both parties. SLAs and KPIs, I am very, very, very open to anybody who wants to brainstorm and talk to me and convince me maybe, or tell me this is all wrong. What FinOps service SLAs and KPIs make sense if you think from FinOps central perspective. FinOps central team. And then when you think of someone else providing FinOps service to you, what SLAs and KPIs actually make sense? What do they can achieve? What doesn't depend on internals actually taking an action afterwards? So that is, for me, I love to talk about this topic. And automation, that is your favorite topic.
It is.
I like it too, but you really love it.
I'm a bit hurt that you said challenges and you looked at me. I'm like, maybe there's a passive-aggressive stance there. You need to check that.
No, I wanted to point out that there's automation.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it does mean that for us to work through the complexity and what can we do centrally to remove the burden on service managers while they are actually working on delivering the business value.
Absolutely, and I think the challenges are also become part of the learning, right? I think it's a joint learning, but when looking at the FinOps journey, it is not just a FinOps journey. You need to engage you need to engage IT as a whole, and including also IT plus the business stakeholders that make it possible. And I think this is a little bit of the complexity of it, is that you cannot look in isolation, as you put it. There's many, when you start mapping, even one of my favorite slides of us, I'm biased by saying it, of course, but it is actually the amount of different people that need to interact even on a single recommendation, right? And when you start actually thinking of that as a company together, you start to look at how can you actually optimize that journey. So this metric of the time to act on a recommendation is actually very interesting because it allows us to see where are the biggest challenges on the flow.
Yeah. And taking basically that picture of the flow that we had, that's a very good discussion starter and the driver to review efficiency of what we are doing and how we're doing and smooth it down. That was my last slide. I'm so impressed by my speed.
Uh-huh. Which leaves a lot of room for questions.
Yes,
hopefully.
please.
You were so worried that you were going to go over on time, and we have plenty of time for Q&A.
Awesome.
I might be in a weird spot. So I'm in the back of the room. This is called a catch box, which means I get to throw it at you, and you have to catch it. Full disclosure, I do not play sports, so hopefully you play sports. Hand raises for questions, and I will get the box floating around the room. Ready? And then nice and close to your mouth. You have to be closer than anything.
All right, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
Well, thank you for your speech, first and foremost. You mentioned a couple of interesting points about integrating the external vendors and suppliers into, let's say, your internal efficiency, and that it's more difficult to do that as opposed to the internal people who may have intrinsic motivation to help their own company, right? So my question that I've been thinking around a couple of months now was, it is fairly easy, I think, to measure how good the implementation of cost optimization is going. So if you have something poorly built and you can have optimizations, put a value on it, and then see how well those external vendors implement those, that's something easy to measure. But the larger they are and the more, let's say, internal or externalized your functions are, up to architecture and things like that, the more difficult it is to improve their behavior and proactive thinking. So, sorry for the long-winded speech, but I was wondering, do you have a good solution, or what is your view about motivating those kind of external vendors to proactively architect well for efficiency? Because that's something you can't really measure. Avoided costs that you've never seen is something you can't measure. So what's your view on that?
You want to take it, or shall I?
You can start. I have opinion.
You have an opinion, all right. I think it's a great question, by the way. And I think it's a question, of course, that we faced. I think many enterprises face. And I don't necessarily agree when we said that it's easier for motivating internals versus externals. Theoretically, yes. I think that the drivers for motivation are a bit different. Well, the internals you can motivate, with short-term incentives and with clear goals and targets. And theoretically, there should be an intrinsic motivation if they are an employee. With external companies, it's usually a bit different, right? But I think the only way that we found to really drive that, in addition to what we mentioned about getting the whole picture, was doing actually the vendor performance management, right? And then if you are really managing the performance of the vendor, and if that type of thing still happen, number one question is that, are your agreement with the vendor supporting that type of thinking? And that's something that we also faced, meaning that when you have long-standing agreements for, let's say, 5 years, right? The way that you design that contract with the vendor maybe does not support actually modern way of doing infrastructure, right? So quite often we had to either amend the contract or then we need to replace the vendor. As simple as that, kind of. But I think you need to look at the chain, not just resign to the fact that the vendor is not delivering. You need to understand the root causes of it. And it might just be that, well, the contract was not designed for it. And I think then you have a gap. And then how you mitigate that gap? A lot of times the way that we mitigate our gaps was by building internal functions to support that. But then you create this kind of different ambiguity on who is actually responsible for the thing, if you end up doing the work that the supplier should be doing. And that's you need to navigate a little bit carefully at that part. I hope I answered part of the question, but I'm not sure if you want to add on that.
I can add notes from the field, in a way. And that is, sometimes my only contact is service manager, who has to deal with our partners, whether it's building the new application or enhancing existing one. And what I see, they need to know that, and we need to equip them with the tools to be able to require that also. So not all, and it goes also to any FinOps activities and also for architecting for the modern environment, we need to require that ourselves on daily level, and that means we need to be educated, we need to know that we are allowed to ask it. Not just because previously we were developing, they came in, they are the experts, but no, we need to, and therefore one thing is that, yeah, we look from the higher picture of the vendor or external performance management as such, but also educating our own people so they can push, they can tell, okay, this I don't like, this doesn't look good. Or do internal reviews on, is this architecture design actually good for us?
Exactly, and I think maybe just to add, vendor performance management does not happen in quarterly meetings. It happens every day. Only the people on the ground can actually every day put those expectations right. It's not about me meeting the vendor once a quarter and try to flag all the problems in the world, right? It needs to be in the day-to-day. And I think that the key to do day-to-day is really co-development. You need to find a partner that is actually willing to co-develop with you, not try to do things on their own way without looking at the picture. Because you are we are internally in the company, you are the best position to actually, to the intrinsic motivation to actually take the accountability. It was a long answer, but good.
Other questions? I'm hoping it's on the other side of the room, and then, yeah, okay, Christian, you got to throw it over there.
All right.
All the way to the front. Yeah?
This can go really well or really bad.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it's very soft. If it hits you, you will be fine. But it's got
You may
to go
have
to the front.
You may have to stand up though, right?
Hold on, you need to catch the box.
You already would have walked there.
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
Okay.
Q&A.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
So the question is, you start your ticketing process about optimization manually. Isn't it bit too slow and too much workload for you that you each month are going manually to report where optimization measures can be done? Was it there possibility that you automatize each month and send the tickets automatically?
Our current tool doesn't allow us to do that.
That's a very dangerous statement to say in a room that there might be vendors. It's a dangerous statement to do. But
I'm welcoming.
But I think usually, I mean, maybe I can open a little bit on that. When we started initially, I think 4 or 5 years ago, I mean, we were not even talking about FinOps in the company, right? And all of the kind of the cloud infrastructure was really managed by a vendor, completely external, as we kind of covered, right? And those recommendations were coming monthly, basically, from the vendor directly to the application owners. And they were, literally an Excel file and an email. Here's how we can save, how you, application owner, can save money. And of course, a lot of people were ignoring that, as simple as you are spamming with emails. I think that we started a journey that we start to give both the visibility and the recommendations, but the process is still very manual with all of these stepping stones. And yes, it can be automated. It should be automated. But before you automate it, you need to understand the whole process. And I think that the whole process can be really complex, and that's what we have been trying to see.
It should be the next step.
Yeah.
Also, it's kind of, there is silver lining in this way. We are forced to look at each of them really through. how is it going? Who is looking at it? Is it even looked at? So is it actually valid recommendation even? So we just ditch some recommendations that don't seem like making much sense. So we are carefully looking through, because we are in a phase when we are gaining credibility for what we are telling people also. So we don't want to spawn out recommendations as they appear. Still, it's just statistical tool, right? It's just a tool that is trying to assume something, that you could save so much by right-sizing or reserving everything for 3 years. Easy one.
Yeah.
Still plenty of time left if there are more questions, and I promise I won't throw this microphone at you. Yeah, up here. I seriously promise, it is soft. It will not hurt your head.
Oh, that's a safe approach.
Here it is. Thank you. So, question, do you have multiple suppliers, and do you actually help them compete? Or do you actually show what another supplier is doing, and how do you make it a competitive game for them?
Tricky question. Yes and no, meaning that, yes, we do have 200 plus IT vendors working with us, and those vendors might be a technology solution, or might be an implementation or service delivery partner. In general, we have key suppliers that, of course, have a larger part of the estate that work with us. And on them, of course, it's they have their own contracts, so we don't have, for the same type of need, we don't have two doing the same. With one exception, which is that you cannot look just, for instance, cloud versus, how do I put this? We are being recorded, so I need to be cautious. But my point is that, for instance, the same exact service, like let's say platform monitoring or backup and disaster recovery, we actually have two vendors, but they are looking at two different types of environments. And from that perspective, creates also a challenge yet opportunity, which allows our internal engineering, or platform engineering, to look, when co-developing with them, to find actually the synergies. Like, hey, if we are doing this way, why wouldn't we do this in the same manner regardless of the environment that we are using? So there's an opportunity to harmonize a lot of things. And that includes also, like, in terms of technology solutions, right? When we started to look at the whole estate, looking at the whole service delivery model, we started to notice also that in some cases we were using, the same, or we have more than two tools that were actually looking at around the same thing, but they were just using different small niche cases. And there's an opportunity to harmonize this as well. But it is a bit of an ongoing journey.
We have time for one final question. Yeah.
I'm going to say...
Oh, we're going to pass it, okay?
Hi, Sandra. Really like the KPI measurement that you put up, which was how do you measure the time it takes to deploy an optimization or an improvement. That sounds like that could have lots of touch points. So the question is how complicated is it, and how have you managed to achieve it, and has Bruno helped you to automate it?
I don't really help much.
To achieve...
Yeah, the measure. You measured that there would be a KPI associated with measuring a performance optimization and how long it takes. So I can imagine, as you just described, there could be quite a long tail and journey with that. So how do you measure those individual components so you get that end-to-end measure? And what's the tool that you're using to measure that?
That was not on slide. I mentioned it as a wish to go forward.
Right.
And that does mean that having automated creation of recommendation, and preferably one system working through where all the parties can follow up, and where it returns to the system to inform us when it's done. And so that is one thing. So it's both, we have different systems, and now also manual work to assign to the right queues and to the right partners, at which application is it related to, but also time to make a decision. So it's technical that we need to build it, or we need to basically sync the system so it works, and it's not just buying new FinOps tool, it's not about that. But also teaching people, so do we measure how our systems work with this KPI then? Or do we measure how long time it takes to make actual decisions? So I think it will be still a lot of brainstorming for us to figure out how this makes sense. And I can say this was one of the best KPIs that I didn't come up with it. I talked with Marco, and I see you there. Thank you so much. We have had very good discussions about SLAs, KPIs, and what makes sense to actually to measure FinOps service success. So that's my wish. And I don't know how it will work, but I would like to keep up with you and also discuss this. How would you see it happening?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And I like that you clarify that I didn't help, but Marco did. So that's good. But I actually would like to add to this, because I think that's part of one of the challenges that we see, is that most of the tools are looking at one specific problem. And if you are looking at the person's actually looking at the whole process, that a lot of the decision makers, which are actually the service managers, I mean, they have multiple of tools. They have tools for FinOps. They have tools for how many vulnerabilities cybersecurity-wise are in their systems, and vice versa, right? There's a lot of recommendations, but it lacks also the totality. And we can do that as part of the IT service management. I mean, we are on a journey to transition to ServiceNow, and at the same time reviewing all of our core service management processes. So we are looking at more and more integration to provide that totality that then, yes, if needed to go to the details, then they can use other tools. But we are looking at the consolidated view. So the FinOps is actually interesting because it touches both service management, it touches the IT finance, it touches platform engineering, and it's very interesting that it converges across different domain areas that they need to come together.
That's a nice closure.
That's my way to help. Yes.
A massive round of applause, please, for Sandra and Bruno.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. I hope you enjoy this video as much as I enjoy sharing all of these amazing FinOps stories, best practices, and expertise. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and leave comments and questions for our speakers. Check out more FinOps X content on our YouTube channel. We appreciate the support.